Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Thursday, March 20th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside is looking pleasant today with a high of 75.2 degrees and a low of 53.5. Coming up on today's show, we'll examine the potential consequences of Trump's recent conversation with Putin and how it could impact Ukraine's trajectory without Ukrainian leaders having a say in their own country's fate. Then, we'll explore Tesla's latest California permit and what this means for the company's ambitious robotaxi plans. Is this another step toward Elon Musk's vision of self-driving taxis becoming reality? We'll break down what this development signals for the future of autonomous vehicles. Stay with us for these stories and more on Alex's News. In a significant development on the international stage, a recent phone call between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin has potentially shifted the dynamics of the ongoing Ukraine conflict. Joining us now with more details is our international affairs correspondent, Ethan. Good morning, Ethan. What can you tell us about this lengthy conversation between the two leaders?
Good morning, Grace. This was quite the marathon call, lasting over 3 hours in mid-March, making it the longest direct communication between Trump and Putin in years. According to U.S. News and World Report, the leaders covered everything from bilateral relations to Middle East peace, global security, and even found time to chat about hockey. But what's particularly noteworthy is how this call has given Putin what many analysts are calling a diplomatic win.
How so? What makes this a win for the Russian president?
Well, as Sentinel Colorado reported in their March 19th coverage, this call essentially allowed Putin to pivot attention away from Russia's war in Ukraine and position himself as a global statesman engaged in broader international discussions. It's a significant image boost for a leader who's been largely isolated on the world stage since the invasion began.
I understand there was talk of a ceasefire during this conversation. What were the terms discussed?
Yes, Putin did agree to a partial 30-day ceasefire, specifically promising to halt attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. However, according to U.S. News and World Report, this came with strings attached that Ukraine and Western allies find problematic. Putin demanded a complete stop to Western arms supplies to Ukraine, a freeze on Ukraine's military mobilization, blocking Ukraine from NATO membership, and new presidential elections in Ukraine.
That sounds like quite a list of demands. How has Ukraine responded to these conditions?
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky wasn't included in the call, which is itself a major point of contention. Perplexity API reports that Zelensky has rejected these demands outright, stating that while Ukraine is open to proposals for a sustainable and just peace, they won't halt their pursuit of NATO membership or accept a stoppage in military aid. Sentinel Colorado noted that analysts see this situation as increasingly unfavorable for Ukraine, which is being treated more like a bargaining chip than an independent nation with agency in its own future.
Given Russia's past behavior, is there any reason to believe they'd honor a ceasefire agreement?
That's the million-dollar question, Grace. According to information gathered by Perplexity API, Russia has a documented history of using ceasefires strategically since this conflict began back in 2014. The Minsk agreements of 2014 and 2015 were frequently violated, with Russia accused of failing to withdraw heavy weaponry and continuing to support separatist forces in Donbass. Even after agreeing to this recent partial ceasefire, Russia reportedly continued launching drone attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, not exactly a Putin-perfect record of honoring agreements.
How are European allies reacting to this direct Trump-Putin engagement?
They're not exactly throwing a European Union party over it. Perplexity API reports that European NATO allies are deeply concerned, particularly because the call happened without Zelensky's participation. European leaders reportedly feel betrayed and view this as a sign that the U.S. isn't coordinating its Ukraine policy with them. In response, Britain is spearheading European efforts to bolster support for Ukraine, trying to prevent Putin from scoring a strategic victory that could threaten European security.
What strategic implications might this call have for the ongoing conflict?
According to analysts quoted by U.S. News and World Report, this call signals a troubling shift toward discussing Ukraine's fate without its presence at the table. The Harrison Daily, citing Associated Press reporting, noted that the call touched on potential divisions of land and assets, and control of a nuclear power plant on the Ukraine-Russia border, essentially discussing Ukraine's territorial integrity without Ukrainian representation. For the Kremlin, this has been portrayed as a major diplomatic victory, with state media praising it as a move toward normalized U.S.-Russia relations, while Putin continues pursuing his military objectives in Ukraine.
Thanks for that comprehensive breakdown, Ethan. We'll continue to follow this developing story as international reactions unfold in the coming days. We're turning now to a significant development in the autonomous vehicle industry. Tesla has just cleared a regulatory hurdle in California that could eventually pave the way for self-driving taxis. Our technology reporter Chloe Williams has been following this story. Chloe, what exactly has Tesla accomplished here?
Thanks, Grace. According to reporting from the California Public Utilities Commission, Tesla secured what's called a Transportation Charter Party Carrier Permit just yesterday. Now, this might sound like technical jargon, but it's essentially permission for Tesla to operate a charter service that will transport its employees in company-owned vehicles with Tesla-employed drivers for pre-arranged rides.
So this isn't quite the robotaxi service that Elon Musk has been promising, is it?
Not yet, Grace. You could say they're still in the driver's seat of this process literally. This permit doesn't authorize Tesla to operate a public rideshare service like Uber or Lyft, nor does it allow for driverless taxis. It's more of a permit to permit, if you will, the first regulatory stepping stone toward eventually establishing a ride-hailing service in California.
What other hurdles does Tesla need to clear before we might see autonomous Tesla taxis on California roads?
The road ahead is quite winding, Grace. For Tesla to operate truly autonomous robotaxis in California, they need to navigate a complex regulatory landscape. They'll need a transportation network company permita, that's what Uber and Lyft have, plus additional autonomous vehicle permits from the California DMV beyond their current testing permit, and then CPUC Autonomous Vehicle Passenger Program permits specifically for operating autonomous vehicles as taxis.
That sounds like a lot of red tape. How does California's approach compare to other states?
California is definitely taking the cautious route. As industry analysts have noted, California has some of the most stringent safety-focused regulations in the country, requiring multiple permits and detailed reporting requirements. Companies must submit what are called disengagement reports and maintain a $5 million insurance bond. Texas, by contrast, has rolled out the welcome mat with a much more permissive approach.
Speaking of Texas, isn't that where Tesla plans to launch first?
Exactly right, Grace. According to Elon Musk's announcements, Tesla plans to launch its robotaxi service in Austin, Texas, in June 2025. That's just 92 days from now. The Texas launch will use Tesla's own fleet equipped with an unsupervised version of its full self-driving software. They're aiming to expand to California by the end of the year, but as we've discussed, the regulatory road is much longer here.
How does Tesla's approach differ from existing ride-hailing services?
That's a key distinction, Grace. Unlike Uber and Lyft, which rely on independent contractors and personal vehicles SOSA, a model we might call sharing the wheel, Tesla plans to own and maintain its entire fleet. This gives them complete control over pricing and service quality. Auto industry analysts suggest this California permit may be Tesla's way of testing the operational back-end services and software needed to run a mobility service before going fully autonomous.
Fascinating development in the evolving transportation landscape. Thanks for driving that story home for us, Chloe.
Always happy to keep our viewers in the loop, Grace. The journey to autonomous taxis is certainly a marathon, not a sprint.
Here are some other headlines. Social Security will soon require in-person identity checks for new and existing recipients. Starting March 31, 2025, individuals will no longer be able to verify their identities over the phone. Those who cannot complete verification through the SSA's online portal must visit a field office in person. This change aims to combat fraud, with the SSA losing over $100 million annually to direct deposit fraud. However, advocates worry this will disproportionately burden rural residents, those with mobility issues, and people with limited internet access. The AARP's Nancy Lemond warned these changes could cause significant delays and economic hardship for older Americans. A group of 62 House Democrats has urged reconsideration highlighting challenges for those in remote areas. FBI agent Jonathan Buma was arrested Monday at JFK Airport while waiting to board an international flight. Buma, a 15-year bureau veteran, faces charges of illegally disclosing classified information after allegedly printing confidential FBI documents to share with associates for a book about his experiences. He has previously criticized the FBI's handling of certain investigations, expressing concerns to media, government agencies, and Congress. Trump's threat of 200% tariffs on European wine would devastate the industry, according to producers. A former president proposed the measure in response to the EU's planned 50% tax on American whiskey taking effect April 1st. The U.S. represents a crucial market for European wine, with France's exports alone valued at approximately €4 billion annually. Italian wine exports to the U.S. have grown to over €2 billion last year. The French Federation of Exporters of Wines and Spirits called the potential tariff a hammer blow that would essentially eliminate the U.S. market. The Department of Government Efficiency is closing 47 Social Security Administration offices across the U.S., with 26 shuttering this year. The closures span 18 states including Alabama, Florida, New York, and Texas, with dates ranging from April to September 2025. This comes as part of a broader initiative to cancel nearly 800 federal real estate leases. Critics note the timing is particularly problematic, as new identity-proofing measures require more in-person visits, potentially forcing beneficiaries to travel further for services. March Madness is offering equal perks for women's basketball teams for the first time. Women's teams now receive the same charter flights, hotel accommodations, and tournament swag as men's teams. Additionally, women's teams will earn financial units worth $113,000 per game played, distributed among conference schools, a system that has long existed for men's teams. Coaches like Dawn Staley of South Carolina have advocated for this financial parity, while Sedona Prince's 2020 video highlighting inequalities helped drive these changes. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Flash 2.0, the Perplexity API, and the Google Cloud Text-to-Speech API. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.